Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be reviewing Arc Light by Eric Carey. The first portion of this review will be spoiler free, and then the second portion will be spoiler filled, and then I'll give a very clear warning before I start talking about any actual spoilers. And so where we kind of jump off in this book is it takes place in our world. I think like 1999 or so. The year is not specific, but it's not really important. But the difference is that the U.S. or China and Russia are like at war with each other, and things are getting like pretty heated. And then mild spoiler warning. Things kind of basically build up to what is basically World War III. That happens really early in the book, so it's not like a huge spoiler or anything. That's pretty much like the main premise of the book. Everything that happens within that is kind of the story. I definitely enjoyed this book. It was not what I normally read. This is the first time I've ever really read like a political thriller kind of drama book. And it was interesting to say the least. Definitely very refreshing. So I think that for what this book was trying to accomplish, it did a really, really good job. I think that Eric Carey did a phenomenal job really like immersing you in with all the military language and honestly political language when they were talking about different political procedures and whatnot. I think that it did a really good job, and you feel kind of like you're in like the in the military. When you're dealing with characters in the military, you feel like you're in the Oval Office if you're dealing with the president. Like, he does a really good job immersing in what I feel like those situations actually are like, or at least the closest you could get to understanding those situations from the outside. A big criticism that I would have for this book is that I felt like the characters were pretty bland. The main kind of protagonist, you're jumping around to a couple different viewpoints. The main protagonist was basically a very stereotypical good guy that I imagine you get in a lot of books like this, where he's just, he's kind of a little bit more rugged, but he's trying to do the right thing, and it's just a little bland for my taste. But it wasn't a bad character at all, just was a little unoriginal. So as I mentioned, this book jumps around to a bunch of different viewpoints, and some of the more interesting viewpoints I feel like are when we're dealing with people in different countries. I found that those were more different, and they had a little bit more depth to them, it kind of felt like. And then you're also dealing with like, obviously there is some military conflict happening in the book, and so you're also dealing with like people on the ground. And while I actually do get the idea of having people on the ground so you get to see like the realities of war and like what it results in, I actually found that probably to be the most boring part of the book, just because I wasn't super invested in the characters that were on the ground. There was one character that was a little interesting, but for the most part the people on the ground weren't very interesting at all. Where I feel like this book really shines is kind of like the political premise that it sets up. Obviously, I can't say exactly what happens for spoiler reasons, but there's a scenario that takes place that I found to be really, really engaging, and that was definitely it's the kind of thing where like if you're explaining to someone like, oh, like what if this happened, and you like outline a bunch of different events, and they'd say, wow, that's really interesting. That is what this book does. It outlines a really interesting, like, kind of what if scenario that I think a lot of people would find intriguing. And so that was definitely the biggest strength of this book, is that kind of scenario. It's a really fun little what if. If you're really interested in like more spoilers than maybe I'm willing to give, definitely like look up the book and maybe read like some sort of like brief description. I'm sure that they could like tell you a little bit more if you're kind of on edge about what exactly the book is about. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone looking to kind of enter the political thriller genre. I think that, like I said, I think that this book definitely accomplishes what it was trying to really, really well. I think that it is fairly well written. Nothing that spectacular or anything, but I don't think that that's what the author was really trying to accomplish in terms of like integrating military lingo, political lingo, all of that stuff into the book so that you really feel immersed in kind of the world. I actually felt like the author did a really, really good job of that. You definitely know that he knows his stuff, like what he's talking about. He seems like he's definitely a student of history, and knows a lot of what he was talking about. So that was kind of cool. If I had to rank this book, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10, just based on kind of the originality of the premise. Was basically the most interesting thing. Other than that, I felt like the execution, especially after a certain point in the book, like after the main premise that I thought was really cool, after that kind of concluded, I feel like it really kind of took a nosedive, and I found myself being a lot less interested in what would actually happen. And so now for the spoiler section. So if you haven't read the book, don't go any further. So as I said previously, I mean, the coolest part of this book is you get this scenario of like, what if Russia launched a nuclear weapon at the United States? And then like, I mean, that right there, like to start off the book, that was pretty engaging, just because I was like, oh, whoa, that's like when you hear about like, oh, different major cities in the U.S. getting bombed like by a nuclear bomb, you're like, whoa, just because you can't even imagine that happening. And then when the U.S. retaliates, I was like, oh, this just got serious. And so that was really interesting. And then the impeachment portion of the book was really, really interesting. Like when they were dealing with the impeachment of the president, I thought that was so interesting. I mean, obviously, I'm a really, really like politically oriented person, so like that obviously is going to be my favorite part. But that That was where this book really shined. I thought that was so cool seeing that scenario play out, like how an impeachment would happen if it happened during like a war. I thought that that was really really cool. Also, something I felt about the book was it was actually really really realistic, and I think the way that people would react if Russia were to launch a nuclear weapon at the U.S., people would be so pro war with Russia. I mean, it's great when they said there was like 90% approval rating for war with Russia. I'm like, yes, that is exactly what would happen. I mean, I personally wouldn't like support war with Russia, but like, I definitely that is so realistic. Like, if the U.S. got hit like that, that is 100% what would happen. So I felt like it was really realistic in that way, and also how like the support for the war really kind of tapered off as it dragged on. I also felt like that was really realistic, and so I appreciated the book for doing that. So as I said in the spoiler-free section, I felt like all the characters on the ground were really kind of bland. I thought that Chandler was a little bit more interesting. It was just kind of cool seeing him like kind of rise to the ranks, but he was the only one that like really was noteworthy. I thought it was kind of cool that he was in like Russia at the same time that Lambert was. Like, that was kind of cool, and that like I like that he found like, oh, I didn't like it, but like it was interesting that he found the bodies of those people that were harmed by the chemical weapons. I thought that that was like a good way of like, you know, kind of showing the horrors of war. So I thought that that was really engaging. As far as Lambert as a character, just for the main protagonist, like I said in the spoiler free portion, he was just a little bland. Like I just expect, oh, he's really good at everything. Like, he's this former like basketball hot shot, and then he's super young and he's like an expert in Russian politics. Like, that was all well and good, but then like, I mean, he lost his family and that was really sad. But like, I mean, the only growth that kind of came out of that is he felt like a little hardened from it. Like, it didn't feel like there was anything super significant that came away from that. And so it just, I mean, I get it. Like, I don't know. It felt a little just like he was, and just that he was right in the middle of all of it. Like, at the end, like when were like trying to launch the missile, like when Russia was like, when they like sealed the warheads of the missiles that were going to launch it to the U.S. Like, I just, it felt a little unrealistic that he would be like right there in the middle on the phone with the president. And it's just, that part I just found like, it just took me out of it a little bit. And this is coming from someone who reads like a lot of fantasy and stuff, but if you're gonna do something realistic, like, I feel like, you know, be realistic. Like I said, where this book really shines is asking those what if questions. Other than that, I did enjoy it. It's probably not something I would reread, at least not for a very very long time, but I definitely did enjoy the book. I'm glad that I picked it up. And so that's about all that I have for this review. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.